Okay, so we're on our last week of the Looking into the Light project, or Contrecher so last week I did a little bit on this one. So that was one of the demos from last week. So this was using mixed oils. That's pretty much as far as I took it last week in the class. So really this bit is pretty much there. Using that photograph I took in the and then this bit sort of needs developing. But I thought there's probably not enough to demonstrate in that. So I thought I'll do that in my own time. Quite like where that was going. Let me finish that one. That was a very much the sort of thing using acrylics, but landscape. So that was a very quick demo I did in my Thursday class, so I thought I'd just show you that one. So I'm going to use, so that was the water mixed with oils. Going to talk a bit about acrylics today. So that was what I did in the Thursday class. Thought I'd use this image though, and just do a little bit on people and those sort of things. And also, at the same time, colour mixing. So in the last project, I did a bit of a revision on the basic colour mixing using primary colours. Okay, so the idea was that you had two of each of the primary colours and some white. I thought with this one, I wanted to have a look at using secondary colours in the mix. And part of this is my own curiosity, my own learning, my own ongoing learning. So this little book I bought last year, I think I told you about, and I quite like this, but I read through it. And I was quite interested in her colour palette, which is a bit different from mine, in that she uses not quite so many different primary colours, but she also uses secondary colours in her mixes. And I couldn't see any browns either. I always tend to rely quite heavily on browns and occasionally blacks. But she's using what you'd expect, the reds, the yellows and the blues, but also using a purple and a green, or a couple of greens actually, and an orange. So I thought that might be quite interesting to try and mix in with those colours. So I basically put them out in my various acrylic palettes. So that's really the secondary colours, orange, purple and greens, a couple of greens. And then the other palettes of what I had out anyway, so blues and pretty much everything, but I'm going to try and avoid using greens. So that was that. Then the other thing about acrylics is, I've gone and started on this bit of paper and rather regretted it, because the paper just absorbs so much moisture, it's so difficult to blend anything with acrylics. So I do find that quite a struggle. This, actually, I think, because I primed this bit of paper, it was a bit easier to put the paint on. But I just thought I'd just show you, if you are using acrylics, this is pretty much how I go about trying to blend them, because if they're wet, I can still blend colours, but once they're dry, it's very difficult. So I tend to use a little bit of medium. So this is acrylic medium. This one is a gloss one. So I've got a gloss one, I think it was a roundy one or something like that. And I've also got a matte one, but it doesn't really matter. What I tend to do, say I've got a bit of dried on acrylic paint like that, what I would do is just paint some medium over that, or into that, and probably thin that a little bit too much. And I just dry that off. And then, just put a little bit of fresh out, it might be a bit too wet now. So, what this effectively does is give you a wet surface to paint into, and then if you wanted to go in with another colour and blend another colour into that, I could start my other colour there, and then just sort of kind of gradually, now it's not really blending, it's more of a kind of glazing. So it's a bit like what the old masters used to do, put like one colour down, and then put another colour over the top, and that would show through. But you can get this sort of softening of the effects that way. And that can give you a little bit more time and a way of getting one colour to merge into another. Otherwise what you're left with is this very sort of dry brush look. Here, I start to put the paint down, I start to absorb, so I then dampen the page, and then it's all cockled there. But I'm basically using this image of Trafalgar Square. So I'm going to move on a little bit to the colour mixing now. So with these colours, obviously this sort of image is mostly grey. So it's quite a nice challenge to try and create greys out of primary colours and secondary colours, and some white, but not be using blacks and browns. And I think if you're somebody that's not confident with colour mixing, these are fantastic exercises, because it really pushes you to try and experiment. So if I wanted to say some of these greys as background, for me most of those, are you okay? Get a drink, yeah, have a drink. Yeah, most of these greys in the background are slightly purpley. So if I started with a purple, that is going to be, purple. That's going to be a bit bright on its own. That's far too lively a colour. However, if you wanted a very bright and breezy painting, you could exaggerate the colours. So if I want to make that a little bit more neutral, maybe try a little bit of orange with it. That's going to be a bit too warm, perhaps a little bit of green. So it's starting to go a bit greyer now, and that's a little bit closer to the sort of colours I can see in those buildings in the back there. So that could be, yeah, that could work quite well for there. Perhaps as I move across, it might be slightly warmer grey, so perhaps a little bit more of the orange in there. And obviously I could also add the reds and blues and the yellows as well. So it could be there. Around here it's a lot darker, so I'll go with some more, got some blue there, some green and purple. Get a different darker mix. And now that's a tiny bit, yeah. Add a little bit of orange. It's gone a bit too purple, so I'm adding a bit of orange, and that gives me a nice dark area for this building here. And then the Trafalgar, what do you call it? Nelson's column will go in there. When it comes to the people, I've already just got a little bit of background in there. What I'm noticing here, which we noticed on some of the other things, like around the tree, around where the sun is, the main light, the actual tree seemed to appear to get a little bit lighter. I think the same sort of thing seems to be happening here. Now, it might be just a sort of photographic effect, but it does convey that, because we're very used to looking at photographs, it does convey that idea that there's a lot of light there and not so much here. So actually, if we lighten up I use the same sort of grey as the buildings, but just lighten it up and perhaps a little bit of warm colour. So I'm adding a tiny bit of yellow and a tiny bit of orange to that. And then if we pop in figures in there, now already that seems, on the palette that doesn't seem very dark at all, but as soon as I pop that on the bit of canvas or paper, that seems much darker, a bit better brush than that. Try that one. So we're getting, yeah, that would work quite well for the figures sort of there, and then the same probably sort of thing for their reflections. It's just a tiny bit lighter for their, not reflections, for their shadows. So the shadows can kind of come out here. I think once you start to get shadows in, it starts to read as people walking across that kind of very sunny surface. And then maybe the figures further in the foreground, they would appear a little bit darker. So I can go in with me darker mix. So this character here could be something a bit more like that. And again, shadow is going to be sort of here. And again, the shadows you'll notice in this photo, they kind of radiate out. The sun's over here. These figures, the shadows are going that way. These ones are going that way. These ones are going that way. So you get that nice kind of radiating out of the shadows, which quite appeals to me. I've taken quite a few photos in Trafalgar Square. My intention is someday to create a bigger painting from them. So yeah, a few things you could experiment with there. next month's project is portraits. And I think so you should, I mean, the actual class program, I always attach that to the bottom of all the emails. So if you're ever not sure where we've got to, check your email, and I'll just keep it on there, so you've always got a reference. So I think we've got a couple of weeks of portraits, and then we move into texture in oils, and more kind of landscapey for a bit. And then yeah, so we've got a few weeks of portraits, maybe do 3 weeks, something like that. I'm quite worked it. Yeah. It may be that if we need longer than some of these projects, I'll stretch them out a little bit. With the portraits, I'll probably do some. Yeah, so I've got down here Zorn palette. So again, that's another of these kind of sort of limited palettes. With that one, it's using black and yellow ochre and cadmium red or some sort of red and white. So it's again another limited palette. So if you wanted to try that might be quite an interesting, just an interesting experiment. Just
for the portraits.
Sorry?
For the portraits.
Yeah, well, for the first part of the portrait, yeah. So that'll be the first week or two, and then I do a little bit on pastels. So these are sort of the requests we have with portraits, sort of around children. So that's what some of the things we can look at with portraits.
Reading the photograph.
Yeah. If you want to work from a photograph, that'd be great. I've got obviously 1 or 2 in here. It's all getting a bit. I've been here for about 10 or 20 years, so 15 years. Yeah, I do a photograph to work from, and what you really need is something that's a good size. Like that's a reasonable size, just out the bag. Something that's nice and clear. Good lighting. Something where you can physically measure bits off if you wanted to. I'd say at least that size. If you're working for something really minuscule or pretty blurry, it's going to be more of a challenge. So I picked something that's a reasonable size. Yeah, so just have a look. If you've got any photos that you want to work from, it could be like family photos, you can if you want. Or equally, just have a look through magazines. Most of mine are all just kind of cuttings out of magazines. Once I've printed off the internet as well. So there's various ones that are printed for different reasons, past projects sort of thing all in here. But yeah, ideally I would say something a fairly neutral expression. I wouldn't go for something greening. Don't make it too hard. It's very smiles in paintings are very difficult to pull off. So very brief expressions. You got them right. Yeah. So have a look at it. Okay.